So, hi everybody. This is Bob Ost, and welcome to the Friday True Community Gathering. Yes, once again, we're here. I think it's like the 49th time we're doing this. I have to get a real accurate count on that, but it's something like 49 or 50 right now. We've been doing it every week, every Friday since April 17th. It was our way of responding to the shutdown. It was me being dragged kicking and screaming into Zoom. I the easier decision would have been to have just not done anything. I think I would be part of a large community of people who just wanted to crawl into bed and pull the covers over our heads and just wait until this all ended. But instead, I decided to do something constructive, helpful, maybe. So we're here every week talking about what it's like living through Zoom, living through the pandemic, and trying to be creative using virtual medium. So thank you all for being with us every week. So many of you have been, as you told me earlier, have had perfect attendance. So that's pretty amazing. I thought I was the only one who's been here every week, but apparently not. It's it's a year later. It's over a year later, and what have we learned, everyone? Um, we've learned that sometimes you just don't know when things are going to end. Everybody probably remembers when we thought it was going to end uh, Labor Day, Memorial Day. Then it was going to be in June. Then it was going to be September. Then it was going to be the end of the year. Um, when we are living through a situation where we don't know what the boundaries are actually going to be, I think it's wise to choose to be active and engaged and involved in whatever way we can. I think it's wise to take what we have, the resources that we have, and use them as best as we can. So I want to commend everybody who has kept busy and kept creative for the past year. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about something that I've always I've always wanted to be doing advocacy. When you're a not-for-profit, advocacy is a very tricky area. Um, it's hard for True to take positions, political positions, because we're not set up to do that. So I'm very happy today to have with us people, Aimee Todoroff and Chris Harcum, who are part of an organization that is dedicated to and was created for advocacy. And Lord knows that in theater and in the arts, one of my big gripes, I've heard lots of politicians talk about different things that they believed in, different things they support. I have almost never heard a politician make a clear, committed statement about supporting the arts. And I've actually called a couple of them on it here in New York because the arts are the core of who we are here in New York City. So on that note, I'm gonna bring Aimee and Chris into the room to introduce themselves and tell me why you do what you do and how long you've been doing it and why League of Independent Theaters started and how it started and all that, and then we'll get into some of the stuff that you're really involved in doing. So important.
All right. Well, thank you for having us. As you said, it is so important, particularly this year, to be politically engaged in the process. We're facing a really, really big election this year where about two-thirds of our city government is going to turn over. A lot of people are term limited out. So we have an opportunity this year, particularly, to really get those arts forward policies and find those politicians that are willing to say, yes, I'm here to support arts and culture. Um, but I have been involved with the League of Independent Theater for about 10 years. And I got involved because I met Chris, who is now my husband. At the time, was dating him, and he said, "Oh, I think you'd be interested. Why don't you come to this meeting with all these really great passionate theater makers, some of which are in your audience today. I think we actually have founding members of the League in the audience today. So I got involved simply because I knew some people who were also involved and were really passionate advocates. And then about a year and a half ago, I stepped into a leadership role as the managing director of the League of Independent Theater. But really, Chris has been at this much longer than I have.
And by the way, I'm glad that you mentioned the fact that you're married, so everybody will know that you're you
That's
don't
why we're here.
yeah you don't need to socially distance.
No, we
We're
are
a
a mixed vaccinated household.
Yes,
though.
we're a blended household.
Yeah, I'm a Moderna. She's a Pfizer.
Mhm.
So
I'm a Moderna.
it's you can almost tell sometimes now.
Yeah.
So the lit or the League of Independent Theater was started right around 2008. Were the sort of grumblings when that was sort of starting, right about the same time when we had the big financial crisis. They were kind of jockeying in terms of what was gonna pull ahead at that point. But there were a lot of spaces that were closing and a lot of things that were happening at the time, and there was just no organization that was happening around it. So John Clancy and a few other people.
Always John Clancy.
Always
You can
John
always
Clancy?
he's always there.
Yeah.
He's like the Zelig of theater.
Yeah, he's certainly, I called him the water witch of theater. He can find it anywhere. He's currently finding it out in Illinois, in the hinterlands. But he and several other people had a couple of different convocations. One was at the Players Theater upstairs, and then the second one was at the Barrow Street Theater, and that had a lot of people. And when you're as you call them spas, but you're also not just you're writing or you're directing and you're producing and you're also the costume designer, and when you're doing multiple hats, it becomes really hard to kind of keep things together. And then just when the climate itself gets really difficult with rents going up or other issues happening, it gets really hard. And so the organization was built around what can we do, not to, like, what you're doing is helping people become better producers and become better at making theater, if you will. The League is here to kind of make sure that the polar ice caps aren't melting so much that everything dies, essentially, if you want to look at it that way. So it's sort of a different thing. And what you had mentioned earlier in terms of being a nonprofit, Lit is a nonprofit, but it is a 501c6 and not a 501c3. The distinction being that Lit can make endorsements in political races, and that I think the credit to that goes to Robert Honeywell, who's a lawyer on top of a theater maker, who was one of the inner circle early on. And so the idea was to do that, but it took a while for Lit to kind of find its political footing. But that happened around about 2009. Scott Stringer gave an impassioned speech when we had a meeting at the Players Club, and said,
Players Theater, Players Club. Yeah.
Exactly. He said, you guys need to tell us, you need to tell us what you need. You need to tell us what's happening here. And from that time, we were like, oh, yeah. And so you've got this functioning city government, and then you've got all of this theater that's happening outside of Broadway, outside of commercial off-Broadway, outside of sort of this thing that you think of that brings in all the tourist dollars. We're in all the different neighborhoods. We're in all 5 boroughs. We're everywhere in the city. And we're part of what makes the city the city.
I just want to go back and thank you for the distinction between the 501c3 and the 501c6. It's been very awkward for me. I have a political gene, and they're not Calvin Klein's. I think politically. I'm very aware of what's going on and get very passionate about things. And I write editorials. Some of you who get the newsletter know I write editorials. I get criticized a lot for it. I try not to take political positions, but once you talk about things that are political, whether you're taking a position or not, you're viewed as being political, and it's been very frustrating, very hard. So I'm in envy of you, and your ability to actually freely be political and advocate for things that I think are very important.
Well, there are distinctions between what we're advocating for independent theater versus, there are other things, that they can be separate. There's certainly overlap. Aimee and I have a theater company, Elephant Run District. We're Elephant Run District is a member of the League of Independent Theater, but Elephant Run District doesn't do the endorsing. Lit does the endorsing. So that's the distinction. So it's a business league, much like the League of Women Voters or something like that.
So tell us a little bit a little bit more about. Excuse me. I want to also. There was something else I wanted to say when you're talking before. I wanted to actually let everybody know, if you don't know who John Clancy is, the reason why I call him the Zelig of theater is because he was in fact the person that was one of the founders of Fringe, New York Fringe Festival, and I actually was at that first meeting too. So I'm kind of a Zelig too, but he always seems to find his way to areas of theater that need to be supported and need to be helped. And he's not a commercial guy. So let's talk for a second about commercial theater versus all the other stuff that's going on, and how you fit into the big picture of theater.
Sure. The League specifically represents what we call indie theater, which means spaces that are 99 seats or less, or non-traditional spaces, or the artists that choose to work in them. It's a really big umbrella. It's what a lot of people think of as the off Broadway, but that's more of a style, things that you think of as avant-garde, or just quite often they're things that just don't fit into a commercial Broadway or off-Broadway model, just artistically, that really didn't have any particular lobbying organization there to support them. So that is our focus. It's on the independent theater artist. However, we also just recently started to create these affiliate memberships, because we do have some commercial theaters, some theaters that fall outside of the size of what we define indie theater as, but whose values and goals align. So while they are technically not members of the indie theater because their definitions fall somewhere else, they get all of the same information, they get the same benefits of being a member. They're just affiliate members.
So tell us, what are the benefits of membership? Why should everybody in this room become members of LIT? We're a member.
Mostly it's information and it's action. There's people like to be politically active. They want to be politically active, but it seems overwhelming. You don't really know where to start. We had a recent Meet the Candidates Forum. Every election cycle, we have a Meet the Candidates Forum where we target issues that are specific to the independent theater community, but that affect the entire the entire artistic ecosystem in New York. This year, a big issue is commercial rent stabilization and rent forgiveness due to COVID. What is the plan for all of these arts centers that have been forcibly closed by government mandate, but for the greater good, for a full year, whose rent is still accruing? There's not going to be a system where you can just turn the light switch back on, because once all that rent is due, that is going to be a big problem.
Let's stop for a second.
Okay.
One of the things that everybody has been proudly proclaiming for the past year, every 3 months, every 2 months, is rent deferrals. It's like, what good is a rent deferral? So what you're talking about is hugely important. If we're making the giant leap from rent deferrals to rent forgiveness, where are we with that at this point? I'm just curious.
We've worked closely with some state senators and some state assembly members. We had a town hall called the Cancel Rent town hall at the beginning of the pandemic. Maybe it was April when we had that. And out of that town hall, we had some politicians there. They heard what our concerns were, and they drafted legislation that is actually in front of the state right now. Up until this year, the league has always focused on city politics, but what we learned is so much of city politics is dependent on the state budget. And a lot of things that particularly are needed in this moment all depend on, it's all dictated by the state. So we were sort of forced to grow this year and start getting involved in state politics. State Senator Brad Hoylman and Assemblymember Harvey Epstein were the primary bill sponsors on a bill that creates a plan for some form of rent forgiveness for venue owners that have been shuttered. But this bill, without getting too in the weeds about the bill, it doesn't leave the landlords holding the bag either. It's sort of a split between the tenant pays some, the landlord pays some, and then the state covers the rest. Now, we've been pushing for that bill, and whether or not that bill actually passes, there's a possibility it will, but the state just had a big budget announcement. And part of that budget is a grant program, and we're trying to get rent forgiveness in that grant program so that there might be grants that are earmarked specifically for back rent. Again, I don't want to get too heavy into the weeds because it's very easy to do. One of the things I've learned since taking over a leadership role in Lit is that it's really exciting to have an idea, to say, we need this thing. This is the thing that our community needs. And actually reach out to your representatives and to hear your words reflected back in the legislation that they craft. And I'm telling you, one of the benefits of membership is it is so possible to do that. It is so possible to connect with your representatives, and you just get the person on the phone and say, this is what we need, and you start having conversations with them. The league has done a ton of work over the last decade in just nurturing those relationships and making sure we know who the right person to call is. So when you do have a specific concern, you can reach out to the league and we can help. And we can connect you to people that also have the same concern. One of the great things about the membership is we never charge anyone. It's absolutely free. And you get information on you'll get a voter's guide of these are the candidates that are arts friendly. These are the ones who maybe support this arts friendly legislation, but not this one, and this is why. You also get, we'll put a survey in the chat so you can take a survey to tell us what candidates you're interested in.
Let me ask you this. From your point of view, do you need as many members as possible so that you can demonstrate that you have a large voice to the politicians?
Absolutely. Signing up as a member of the league, I think, and maybe I'm biased, but I think it's a no-brainer, and I think it's a win-win because you get information, but you're not obligated to, you don't have to pay a membership fee. You're not obligated to take part in any action if you don't want to, but it gives you information on how to take part in action if you do. Or, for example, you really want to push a specific issue. We have call parties every other Thursday where you can get together with a group of theater makers and call about that specific issue. That's one of the reasons that we got open culture passed. We were very instrumental in getting that legislation passed. Now, open culture is not a perfect bill in its implementation, and we're still working on it, but we were able to at least get something into law.
Well, that's a good segue into open culture.
Oh, good. Oh, good. Oh, good. Yes.
So you want to talk about that a little?
Oh, what would you like to talk about with open culture?
Well, where it started,
Yes.
what were the original precepts that you were trying to get across, and how has it grown, and what has it become?
Sure, it is a good bill, even if it is not what we all we had hoped for. So I'm just prefacing it there because I know quite a lot of people in the community have a lot of opinions about it. In the beginning of the pandemic, I think I had the same thought that a lot of other people did, that we have to move outdoors. We have to take advantage of our public spaces in the same way that restaurants are. Uh, and I reached out to the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment and started a series of conversations about, how do we get a fast track, one stop, easy permit process that is low cost.
I just want to say, everybody, if you remember Carla Hoke Miller was here, and she talked about this a couple weeks ago. So this gives you another thread to pick up on.
Right.
If you remember the conversation we had with Carla and the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment.
Right.
So I just want to, in case anybody was sitting there going, "Gee, this all sounds a little familiar. Let me, where do I know this from?" So.
Carla was instrumental in getting the meeting set and making sure that our interests were heard. But yeah, the main goal was we wanted it to be fast track, something that you could just submit for and get a turnaround within a number of days. And if you've ever tried to get a permit from the city, you know that is not usually the case. And bringing the cost down so that we could use outdoor space for cultural activities the same way restaurants do. It moved through various committees, had interdepartmental convenings to talk about it, and we tried to get the mayor to make it a program. And finally, one really strong arts candidate, Councilmember Jimmy Van Bramer, who is now running for Queens Borough President and is the first lit endorsed candidate of this election cycle. So if you live in Queens, we wholeheartedly endorse Jimmy Van Bramer for the Queens Borough President. He said, fine, I'll just write a law. We'll make it a bill. We'll make it a law. And so we then had to work with them to create language for the law that made it as equitable as possible and still worked within the existing structures of city government, which is eye-opening. It's an adventure in of itself. But we then got bill sponsors. We had call parties and got different council members to sign on as co-sponsors of the bill. And then once you sort of get a critical mass around it, they have a vote. And it passed unanimously.
Carla talked a little bit about the specifics of the initial program that's coming up, which is basically it's street theater, correct? So do you want to tell us a little bit? It might be reiterating what she said, but I think it's relevant right now. What exactly how are we opening up theater?
Through open culture. So we're still talking about open culture, right? Okay, I just want to make sure.
Well, there's also that's different from the 122 streets.
Yeah, the pop-up things are totally different.
Yeah, okay.
The pop-ups are let's not get into the weeds about it. The pop-ups are coming from
I love the weeds.
I could go deep in the weeds. The pop-ups are coming from the state, and they're a program that's funded by the state. Open culture is just a permit. So if you are one of those great spa people, you can apply for this permit for a block, a city block, and you can perform on that city block. There's a lot of restrictions that we had fought really, really hard to open up, and we did get some changes that we wanted, but right now you are limited to the amount of days that you can use the street. So you couldn't, if you wanted to have, a month-long run, you're not going to be allowed to do that because there's, the idea is you need to share the street. You're not going to be able to reserve it for that whole time. So you're limited to 4 non-consecutive days. So there's
how many hours is it? Hours of during the day that you're limited?
You can be there as from. It's been a while since I've read so I don't want to lie to you because the hours change. But basically, you can be there from morning till night. I think from 9 a.m. till 10 p.m. And you don't have to be there the whole time, but you are able to use the street the whole time.
So, question: is there a list of locations that people can use, or do you go to them and say, "I'd like to do something on 84th Street"?
there is a list of locations, and the league has made a map, so I'll put that in the chat as well. And I'll put the information from the Open Culture website in the chat as well, because they have all the exact rules in there. But they are, I think we're at 125 streets right now that are pre-designated as Open Culture streets. And you tell them, I want to perform on this street. It is a $20 permit, and you will have your answer within 5 days.
Yeah, then I wasn't confused. That's what I thought. That's what I was trying to push you towards. I had said 122 streets. It's 125 streets, but I remember this from the conversation with Carla. It's a start, and are there any socially distancing rules that are applied if you are doing this?
The state mandated socially distanced protocols are in place. It is up to you sign an affidavit saying, I attest that we are going to maintain all of the COVID protocols, including, masking, sanitation, distancing. It really is up to you to maintain that level of responsibility.
And well, it should. So.
And well, it should. And we actually recommend that you go above and beyond. The state sets a minimum, but we're all responsible producers, so you should do as much as you possibly can.
But we're entering a period of transition where some of us are fully vaccinated, mm-hmm. Some of us are maybe not, and people that we don't know may be running around not caring about vaccines. So how much longer do you think we're going to be required to do these protocols?
Do you have to check the CDC?
Yeah, that's
okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's really hard to say. I mean, I was at my doctor's office today, and I just said, "Oh, how long do you think we'll be wearing masks?" And she said, "Probably 2 more years."
2 more years.
Yeah.
2 more years of my glasses fogging up.
An offhanded, comment from a medical professional, but so I can't really say.
It could well be. I mean, basically, I think that we should all err on the side of caution, and I think most of us here, if not all of us, understand the importance of licking this thing once and for all. Now that we have new variations that are coming along.
I don't know if licking it is what we want to do.
Oh,
no.
But one of the
bad metaphor.
But one of the things
bad metaphor.
You have to consider, and this is sort of falling into the world of the independent theater producer, is not every theater piece is going to be a one-to-one. You're not going to be able to just take whatever it is that you want to perform and plunk it into the middle of the street and have that work. You really need to tailor what it is that you want to do for the street. And you're all producers, so you're all smart, that. It's probably not going to be a good idea to do, a
Les Mis.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
But you can do things that are smart, that make sense, that bring culture into the community. And also, if some of your grants are dependent upon producing something, it keeps your grants active or keeps you grant eligible for the next year.
I will
good
say,
point.
Just having had experience doing some theater outdoors in New York City, sound is not your friend here in a lot of ways. And I look at this as a potential opportunity for people who have been in the Zoom box for the last year to do something physical in a way, socially distance and all that other stuff, but you can actually use your body to express things in front of other people. Whereas we're just, from the chest up, as it were, trapped in the box.
Right.
Okay.
Ed Einhorn's doing a musical just up the street, 2 blocks away from us.
That's still Untitled Theater?
Yes. Cabaret in... Right. It's a cabaret show, and we're going to go. I'm very excited. It'll be
Sunday afternoon.
Be the first theater we see in a while.
Well, if you have a link for that, put it into the chat by all means.
Cabaret in Captivity is what it's called.
Cabaret in Captivity. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
I want to actually go back to a couple questions. To go back to membership, Eben wants to know: do you consider members located outside New York City, and does that impact things in any way?
We will put you into a slightly different category. We'll call you an associate member simply because we have always been so focused on New York City. However, that is changing because this time has forced us to reconsider everything that we do. I never in a million years thought I would be in a budget conversation with state senators. Or mayoral candidates are asking us to look at their arts platform to say, make sure that this works out for everybody. So I would say apply for now. Also, you know the people that hit the approval button. And for now, you'll probably be like an affiliate member, but then it's an ongoing conversation. We're getting more and more statewide as well. But I appreciate that question.
So Jane Dubin is pointing out that James Corden did Les Mis as part of his street musicals. Okay, I sit corrected.
It is
in a
possible.
crosswalk, yes.
It is possible. That permit was much more expensive than an open culture permit.
And also, can you do me a favor? Can you sort of explain the difference between what we're talking about and pop-up performances?
Of course.
Sure. So the NY pops up. I guess it's sort of state funded. It's bigger names. It's a sort of almost like a cross between like, here's some big time entertainment meets a flash mob kind of a thing, whereas this is, hey, let's put on a show. But instead of doing it in a barn, you're going to do it on the street, and you're going to do it at a set time, and you're going to get permission to do it, and you're going to do it socially distanced and all that stuff. Whereas the NY pops up, I think the idea is just like let's show off what New York culture is. I feel like this is a little bit more community based.
Because actually, Carla also talked about the pop-up performances as well. They were more structured kinds of things that had city backing or city support.
Yeah. I think the main difference in understanding it is that the NY Pops Up are performances produced by the state. They're paid for by the state. That performers and technicians are all paid by the state. The open culture it's a permit. You're the producer. That's the main difference.
There's something else to read. We have the open culture in New York pop-ups we've dealt with. I'm just trying to see what other things I wanted to talk about. I want to actually remind the room that your questions are welcome. You should have at the bottom of your screen on the navigation bar, there should be a whole bunch of things to say mute, stop video, security, participants, and blah, 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 blah. And as you get towards the right side of it, you should see reactions. So if you open up reactions, you'll be able to see a raise hand. So raise your hand so that we know that you have something that you would like to say. I'll keep looking in chat for things that you want to say, but it's easier for me to actually immediately see your hand raise if you can do that. So let me go back to you, Chris, because you were involved with the beginnings of. We're sort of going backwards here, but you were involved in the beginnings of LIT. First of all, let's talk about. Am I wrong in remembering that one of the original things that we talked about with League of Independent Theaters was trying to get away from the off-Broadway and off-Broadway branding of theater and get more into indie? Were you part of that whole thing?
Well, I wasn't. I was sort of like early second wave of lit. I have to say, I wasn't like in the. I wasn't, in the room when it was first hatched. But I came in like, I don't know, 6 months into it. It's actually after it was really formed, and joined the board of directors then. But in terms of the branding, I think one thing. Oh gosh! So this
unofficially.
This started when, and I'm trying to remember the playwright's name, got up at the Innovative Theater Awards and said, "Off Broadway is a terrible term," because in music you don't say off rock. You don't, in film, you don't say not, not the big, production.
Not studio,
that sort of
off
thing.
studio, out of studio productions.
And he said that independent theater kind of explains it a little better, because we're not, and the difference, I think, in the mentality is, and John Clancy would say this a lot, it's not a ladder, it's a circle a lot of the times. It's not, oh, I'm doing this now, but I really want to be doing that. For some people, this is all they want to do, is do independent theater. They want to do other things like that. So to take it out of this thing that makes it sort of the junior league, or this idea that it's not as good as something else or something like that, I think that was part of it as well. And I think to also, I think it was just,
well, Ralph is saying that he holds that off Broadway is part of indie theater. My understanding of it, and this is like Martin Denton was one of the people that John Chatterton, and I think I was even one of them.
Yeah.
We basically we're trying to move people away from being the shadow of Broadway, and basically making a statement that says we are what we are. We're not a poor man's version of anything.
Right.
We are independent theater. And it's right, because it's an aesthetic in and of itself. It's different. It's usually different than commercial theater, although the crossover over the last 5 years has become a little weird. Harder and harder to tell what belongs in commercial theater, and I think that's another discussion for an entire panel. So we're trying to. Off Broadway right now is in trouble. Okay. Will you grant me that as a truism?
Absolutely.
Okay, so it's a model that's very difficult to make work. It used to be the lifeblood of theater. It was the incubator of theater. It was where artists went to sort of get their credits and get their experience as they were climbing up the circular ladder to bigger and better things. Over the years, off Broadway has become more and more difficult as a model financially to make it work and make it viable. The best that we can do right now is off Broadway is basically a place where not-for-profit theater companies who can afford it can create theater. So I'm not sure that the rebranding it as indie theater really addresses that, but it does at least say that there is something else. There is another incubator. Right. Indie theater is an incubator. It can be an incubator. We've been saying a lot lately that the incubator for theater right now has become regional theater, and that's true. But I think that there is also an incubator available in terms of indie theater and well, small theater companies.
I think also in the minds of people that don't know, they think that Broadway is the street, and then every Broadway theater is on Broadway physically, and then off Broadway is one street over, and then off Broadway would be right off the Hudson River. And so it kind of takes it out of that idea as well. And indie theater can happen anywhere. So, anybody that's tuning in from Toronto, there's indie theater in Toronto, certainly. There's indie theater in Chicago, there's indie theater, anywhere you're here, there's indie theater in North Carolina and Iowa and all those places. And I think that it's sort of more of an idea. And I mean, in London, they have pub theater. It's sort of the same idea, but indie theater thrives there as well. They call it fringe theater a lot of the times there, and so there's that sort of crossover. And I mean, if you want to call it off Broadway, great. If you want to call it indie theater, great. Fringe theater, great. Pub theater, whatever you want to call it, that's absolutely fine. That doesn't matter.
I think my concern about it is just as a marketing, just for marketing purposes. How do we attract people to indie theater? I think there needs to be more of a marketing
sure yeah
thing going on.
I think that's absolutely a thing. And we've had discussions with certain folks about what could the city do to make that, so that somebody coming in from Tokyo or from Nebraska or wherever they might be coming from would go, oh, hey, I'm going to go see this that's only running for 3 weeks, as opposed to seeing that that's been running for 20 years.
That's exactly what we have to do. We have to find a way of making tourists come to New York to see something other than Les Mis.
And the other thing,
I hate to beat up Les Mis. I love Les Mis.
I'm totally, I'm agnostic about Les Mis. But I think that the other thing in New York City is that we have culture deserts, just like we have food deserts, just like we have, responses to the COVID crisis deserts in the city. And I think that, indie theater can go anywhere. There are programs to take, Broadway out to the outer boroughs and that sort of thing. But like indie theater can be anywhere. There's a whole library system in our city with spaces in them. You can do things in those, like there are, affiliations one could have with spaces that you wouldn't think about, and you can put theater there. And I think
we had Anita Durst here as well.
Oh,
so
great.
we've talked about some of those.
Yeah.
I want to actually bring Ralph Lewis in. Ralph is making tons of comments, and I think Ralph has a lot to say on this, and I want to hear him. Ralph, do you mind coming in?
As you're bringing him in, I just want to say how much I appreciate all the comments. If you could see me, I'm reading them all, and I just want to say yes, yes, yes to all of you. Especially Emelina made a great point about how we are an increasingly mobile community of artists. So indie doesn't lock you into a particular space. I think Ralph has a great point. You can be indie and off Broadway, or off Broadway. They're all they aren't.
Yeah.
Well, so part of the semantic complication here is that a lot of the assumed definitions that we're working with are Equity's definitions. Yeah. Equity basically defined Broadway as being a certain size theater, off Broadway as being a certain size theater, and Showcase and off Broadway as being 99 seats or less. So we're stuck with a nomenclature that is really about it's about contracts more than anything. It's not really about creativity. It's about contracts.
Yeah. I mean, I think the idea is that it's about, we're talking about, when all the playwrights that are listening in are writing their plays, they're writing about ideas and concepts and emotions and things they want to create a world about. How many seats are in front of that world watching it? That's not as important. Like you can do the same.
But it really still becomes the tag that is attached to the work. But this is off Broadway.
But somebody makes a point that indie means small, and I would argue that small, perhaps in seat numbers, but in terms of ideas, much bigger a lot of the time.
Yeah.
So I see, Ralph. I was going to have you say a couple of hundred things that you wanted to say, and Carrie, you came into the room? Did you want to say something as well?
Yeah, I just came in. I'm new to this. I'm actually moving from LA to New York, hoping to be a bi-coastal actor, writer, singer. Starting in another month, I'm making the move. So I'm just introducing myself. I had a thing. I had to take my daughter to get her second vaccination. Yay, vaccination.
Okay.
I just wanted to say hi to everybody. I've got a movie that's going to be shot in England and Morocco that's starting pre-production in July and shooting in October, fingers crossed.
Well, welcome to True, Carrie.
Thank you. Good to be here.
May I take your video off and we'll just have our conversation again with Aimee and Chris? There we go. Okay, so Ralph, what were the few dozen of the points that you wanted to make?
I would say I do this on all these Zooms. I love chatting in the comments, so I don't mean to take away from anything that you guys are saying out loud. But I've been doing this for over 30 years now. So a lot of the stuff I'm hearing today and I hear every Friday are things that I've hear again and again and again. I've heard them all before, and we keep reinventing the wheel. It's kind of our job to do this. We're doing it in virtual performance in the same way that we did, back in the 70s and 80s, and the way the early off people. I've spoken to many of them, Robert Patrick and Bob Heidi, and they say the same things that we're saying.
How was Robert Patrick? There's a name
Robert
from the
Patrick?
past. Yeah.
Yeah, he used to be the doorman at the Cafe Chino. But I
He's
would
a-
say that
He's an old
there
friend
is
of mine.
Ah, great. Yeah, I love Bob. Anyway, I think certainly in terms of acting technique, there's some very big differences because, let's be honest, indie theater is not the training ground for Broadway. It's just not. Broadway does musicals. They do big musicals. They do star-driven straight plays occasionally. So regional theaters and training programs and universities, they train the singers and dancers that end up on Broadway. Indie theater is much more of an intimate performance style. I mean, if you're an actor in a 99 seat theater and you act the way you would in a 1,400 seat theater, you're going to scare people.
I'm actually going to disagree with you, Ralph, because I think that a lot of the talent, and we're not just talking about stars, we're talking about people in all aspects of production of commercial theater. A lot of them do start off in indie theater.
Yeah, I don't know. I would look to see those people,
and I'm also talking about designers. I'm talking about writers. Writers start someplace. Writers don't always start in high profile places.
Yeah, well, I'm talking about actors and acting technique. I could see some relationship with writers. I think you have a point there to be made. But I do think the acting technique of indie theater is intimate, and it's more akin to the acting style you'd use in an indie film. It's smaller.
I have another good example, and because Jane Dubin mentioned it herself. Jane Dubin now produces on Broadway. The first show that she produced was in a 99 seat theater. She started off producing in small theaters and showcases, and a lot of people that I know a lot of these people, and a lot of us all started off in the showcase world. The showcase world is also kind of part of indie, and we've some of us have stayed there and some of us have moved on, and I talked to a couple commercial producers about this, and one of the general ideas that I've heard from many, I think Jane may be one of them, is that the producers who have had huge commercial success could be asked or could be expected. It would be nice if they would actually support off Broadway theater and indie theater. That's where the support can come from. It's not as likely, to go back to advocacy, it's not as likely that we're going to get a whole influx of financial support from state and city government. Although I know you're trying, Aimee.
I am trying, and again, I talked to the DCLA, and we're trying to shift the dynamics around funding a little bit in a way that helps everybody, because I know that there's that scarcity mentality, but it really can help everybody through re-granting programs. Again, I could go off on policy all day, but I do want to say what you're speaking to. I think it was Maka earlier in the chat mentioned that indie helps balance out a hierarchy, the idea of a hierarchy. And I think the terminology off Broadway, Broadway, it creates this image of a ladder of there's, the little babies, and then you're kind of an adult, and then you're like the real star. And we all know that's not how it is. It's not a ladder. It's more like currents where we're all working in these different ways and moving through different modes of working. So that is my big pitch for indie. And you're absolutely right that yes, the larger producers, we need to come up with ways that they support the entire ecosystem, because the entire ecosystem is what keeps everyone alive.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't be unreasonable to ask Jeffrey Sellers to maybe give a little bit of influx of support to the smaller theater companies and the smaller theaters.
Like a tithe.
A tithe, yes, tithe. Tithing with a tithe of Hamilton would be like amazing.
Yeah.
Right. So that you may have heard of the Indie Theater Fund, and which is now becoming Indie Space. To brag a little bit about the work that Chris and Ralph and some of the people who've been doing this for a long time have done. That entire organization started as a working group in the League of Independent Theater, and then branched out, and for all the legal reasons we talked about earlier, us being a 501c6, them wanting to actually work in funding, Legally, it's a different organization now, but they have just blossomed and grown and given out like over $100,000 in emergency grants during the time of COVID. So having them as a sister organization is really wonderful as well. And I think some of that came out of Ralph's work, I believe.
Joanne Dean brings up a very good point. In your, I'll put it a little differently. In your advocacy work, have you ever tried to increase awareness of accessibility for people who otherwise can't necessarily enjoy the theater experience like the rest of us?
Absolutely, absolutely. It's something with open culture, we pushed to make sure that one of the things that is, there's very few qualifications to get the permit, but one of the qualifications we pushed for is that you must keep the performance accessible through different means to people who have mobility issues, hearing or sight concerns. So that's baked into open culture. And we do push it when we're doing things on the state level. That's kind of the big fight right now with the budget that just came out in terms of eligibility for grants and prioritizing grants. But we absolutely can do more. I'm always happy for that reminder because it reminds me that we can do more.
I want to just jump in also. Joanne, I don't want to speak for her, but I believe that she's very much involved with ASL, with sign performances. I'm also been an advocate for open captioning because a lot of the deaf community, they do not know sign language. And open captioning, I think, is another thing that I'd like to see a little bit more advocacy for. Commercial theater's doing it. I tried to get grants so I could do my programs with open captioning, and I wasn't able to get any funding for it at all. It's not that expensive, but it does have costs involved. I just want everybody to be aware of the fact that adding open captioning to your performance opens up your performance to accessibility for a lot of people who wouldn't be able to enjoy it otherwise.
I am going to give you in Zoom, you can now have automatic captioning. It's just a flick of a button and you can turn it on.
Well, I'm going to have to do that. I'm going to have to find that button from now on. I
will send you an email offline and you can share it with anybody. I found that trick during one of our Meet the Candidates forums.
May I ask you, by the way, what Zoom account do you have? Is it a pro? Is it a business account? Do you know?
Pro. It's a pro.
It's a pro?
I think.
Because the pro is the basic. I mean, there's a basic, but the pro is. I just upgraded to a business because I think that some of.
Definitely have it.
Yeah.
I should have it. Yeah.
I'm
looking for other comments in here. Can I have hand raises because I might be missing a lot of people's comments because there's been a lot of chat.
That's nice, Beth. I will say, just to kind of bring it, around because the Meet the Candidates forum happened with the League of Independent Theater, and I think for people that don't know, and videos are going to come up at some point. We'll have those at some point.
We can put a link in the chat.
But what's really fascinating, Bob, back to what you were saying earlier about wanting to advocate or have some kind of connection, like kind of bringing our world with the political world together, and that's what LIT does. What's really fascinating when you watch the Meet the Candidates forum, the amount of daylight between candidates is so narrow. We're so used to national politics where you've got this candidate and you've got this candidate, and the overlap is almost negligible. Whereas in city politics, it is very, very, very slight, and it's really hard. It gets into very what you were talking about before about not wanting to get bogged down in the details. The space between the candidates is so slight that you really have to get into the details. And I would encourage everyone in New York City, because this upcoming election is going to be a ranked choice voting election for the first time.
So exciting!
In this primary.
Explain for people who don't know.
Sure. So RCV, ranked choice voting, you're going to get to basically put in your top 5. So you can have candidate A as number 1, candidate B is 2, 3, 4, and 5, and so on. And then what happens is, if you know, and when you're looking at the mayoral race, you know, a lot of people haven't made any decisions. They've been saying, because they know no one's kind of jumping out. They know Andrew Yang because he's got a little bit more name recognition and exposure, but then everybody's kind of like, oh, I don't know who this person is. Or maybe you know Eric Adams because you're in Brooklyn, or maybe you know Maya Wiley because you watch MSNBC, or you know, that sort of thing. But in terms of really knowing all the different candidates and really making an informed decision, it's really kind of hard. But with ranked choice voting, you make your top 5, and then the bottom one, if that doesn't, if there's no votes, that gets kicked out, and it kind of goes into heats until you get down to the winner, and then the winner is going to go into the election that's in the fall. So your vote in June, by June 22nd, is so much more important in these elections, because we are a heavily Democratic city, that oftentimes in any of the races will decide the true outcome. So make sure that you're registered, make sure that you're up on all the candidates, check out the league's website and the voter guide information, and look at the videos of the Meet the Candidates forum if you haven't already seen them, because that's going to tell you a lot.
Yeah, so to sort of crunch that down into really simple form, in New York City, a lot of times we have 12 to 17 candidates running for one council seat. Ranked choice voting is a way for us to do the runoff all at once. So if nobody wins the majority, then your your vote goes to the second choice, and you keep adding all the vote totals in until you do get to a winner. It is been used really well in San Francisco and Maine, and they've been doing it in Ireland for forever. And it's a way to build consensus, and also to you get to a winner without having to have the special elections.
And it's why you're seeing some of the candidates go out and play nice with the other candidates, as opposed to going out with sharp elbows against all of them too. Right. Because rather than having one person who might not really be the majority winner, you know, because waiting for everybody else to knock everybody else out, and then, oh, I'm going to win. You know, people are wanting to be, you know, if I'm not your first choice, I'll be your second or your third choice to help advance my campaign. So there are a couple. That's not to say there aren't any elbows, because there are a couple going out there. But for the most part, you're seeing people say, "Hey, it's good to be out here with this person."
So to go to a different topic very briefly, because we're kind of at the end of time. What is the initiative right now to help the grants to venues? What is it? VLO? I want to say VLOG, but is that right?
It's the SVOG.
SVOG.
The Shuttered Venues Operator Grants. And I'm going to ask, could you I emailed you the link to the Meet the Candidates forum, and we're going to put that in the chat so you can watch the videos.
Oh, by the way, Chris, several people want to vote for you.
He is great candidate. It's the YouTube link.
Oh, okay.
So again, this is a great example of how advocacy is really important. Very early on, a group of independent venue owners that are primarily like music venue owners and operators started advocating for this, and we joined in and helped them out. But the grant is sort of skewed heavily towards commercial music venue operators. So theater operators are eligible, but it's a lot harder hurdle for us to get in there, and we're probably not going to be in the first round of money given out. So again, this is a great example of how advocacy from their member organizations worked really well to get them a really strong bill, and we as an independent theater community needed to do better to make sure that we were considered in there as well. We're gonna get some, but you may have heard, if you follow Twitter at all, that SVOG was trending because it has been so difficult. It's like a 40-page application process, and then the website crashed, and you have no chance at a do-over. So if your paperwork is wrong, if there's something that's not checked, they just throw it out and you can't apply again. So it's been a real nightmare, and we're talking with the Small Business Association to see what can be done to make it easier. But it is one potential lifeline. We're actually a little more excited about, I have a notepad because there's so many things happening. There's an Arts and Culture Recovery Grant that's $40 million that just came from the state. And that will be open up specifically to arts and culture venues. And there's also $20 million earmarked for facilities improvement grants. So, I mean, we're all going to need to adjust our HVAC systems. All the things that, you know, we're going to need to even buy temperature scanners, things that in a post-COVID world we're going to need. So there's some grant money for that. And then there's also a big small business grant that is $800 million. And right now, one of the things that we're seeing is that the bill neither explicitly says that arts organizations are included or not included. So we're pushing to get a really clear yes. Small arts are small businesses. These people that run these venues and our artists are small business owners. So they should be able to access that $800 million in state grants as well. So, and it's just a simple matter of call up your state representative and say, I'm an art maker and I'm a small business and I want to be included in this money.
So I'm having a hard time just ending because I'm very interested in all of this. One question to the room: would you raise your hand if there's an issue dealing with theater or the arts that you would like to see LIT advocate for? Is there something that you think should be done that you don't know about, that they may not be doing? Okay, Joanne. You can turn your mic on.
Hi there. My company is Signation, and I do work with deaf and hard of hearing and in the disability community. So one thing along the lines would be just for disability and for accessibility, if it could be made that a line must appear in a budget for theaters, to advocate for that at least the line is there, because then funds can come in. It shouldn't be the afterthought, it should be the forethought in providing theater for all audiences. So that, I think, for any grant that goes in, that somehow how are they outreaching? What is the source? Are you video? That goes for your marketing. That goes for any of the videos going out. So that's what I've been told. I'm working on that as an initiative with some Broadway producers right now.
Okay, so now Aimee knows about it too. So
thank you.
I actually have something. Excuse me. I don't know what to do about this. I mean, this is the issue that is most troubling to me, is the New York State Department of Labor's position about working in theater, about the fact that there is no such thing as independent contractors in theater, that we're all employees. Have you done anything about this? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Randy at Indie Space has been working on that, so I
drives me nuts.
Recommend Randy. She's got much more knowledge about that. But it's sort of a divide our labor because we are an all volunteer organization, so we've only got so much. But it has made people throw files across the room, not violently, but just makes
sometimes violently.
Just makes you throw up your paperwork. It is
especially if the auditor's in the room.
Oh, it is. And again, this just goes back to
I've been audited twice.
Oh, wow.
I won both times. In fact, they refunded $686 to me the second time.
Wow.
But they were trying to demonstrate that I had people that I should have been that I shouldn't have been considering independent contractors. And showcases, it's the ruination of showcase. It's going to just destroy showcase if this ever becomes just a wall that nobody can get over.
This goes back to the trouble people are having accessing those shuttered venue operator grants is how do you define your employees, and sometimes if you don't have, people are finding themselves disqualified when they shouldn't be because the way the state defines the term. So we are advocating for it and for better understanding in the future, but this is sort of part of the big picture of why advocates for the arts are so important, because the people that are making the rules that determine our life don't often have a working knowledge of what our life is like.
I had a conversation with one of the people at the New York State Department of Labor. I had a half-hour Kafka-esque conversation with him. He had no idea what we do, no idea at all.
Yeah. So I'm sure some of you are familiar with what it means to be fiscally sponsored. I'm going to share this with you. I was in a series of meetings with people in our city government, the people in our city government who you would think should know. And it wasn't until about our 5th meeting that I realized that when I was talking about how they've excluded fiscally sponsored organizations in this legislation, they didn't know what fiscally sponsored meant. They thought I just meant an organization that gets donations. They didn't understand that fiscally sponsored is a completely separate category. And if you want to apply for a DCLA grant, you are disqualified if you are fiscally sponsored. So this is part of that like Kafka-esque, why arts advocates need to get in the room. You need to just call and call and call your representatives. It's actually really easy. We're all performers, so we can all, turn it on when we need to, and most of us. But, one of the things Lit does is we do these call parties, and we also provide scripts for when there's an issue. So you can just copy and paste that if you want to email it, or just follow the script to call. But that's why advocating is so important, because decisions get made, and unless people are in the room advocating for you, then they're not taking your reality into consideration when these rules are being set.
And this is also, while we're talking to a bunch of artists and producers and people like that, why we need more people like us in office, running for office, actually there. We understand these issues. We understand that arts issues are economic issues. They are, we cover so many different things with what we do. We are an economic engine of the city. We're a very important economic engine of the city. Without us, there'd be no New York City. Yeah. And the fact that, we're making a dent with this. But, hopefully in 10 years, you have that conversation again, Bob, they wouldn't understand that.
I was at a fundraiser for somebody who's running for mayor a year ago, by the way. I won't say who it was. And I listened to all of the policies that he was advocating for and all the wonderful things he was going to do. And finally, at the end, I raised my hand. I said, what about the arts? This is New York. How come nobody ever talks about the arts? And he actually said some very positive things about the arts. Never heard him say them outside of that room.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of a, people think of us as a nice to have. People think of us as a. We are
New York. We are the New York economy. We are the New York economy. We're like the number one source of income for New York.
Yeah, I don't know the New York City number off the top of my head, but because I've been doing state numbers. I'm not a numbers person, but New York State, the arts and culture are 7.5% of the entire GDP of New York State. We're for the state, we're the 3rd largest economy. We're larger than transportation and construction and agriculture combined. So even when you think about just the amount of economic impact we have, everybody likes to say they support arts and culture, but getting candidates into office that actually know arts and culture, know what we need, are going to show up and actually fund arts and culture. And there is a difference between funding arts and culture and funding artists. We need both because artists need to be able to live and work in New York City. It's just vitally important. And someone just asked how you get involved in the chat, and I think the first step is just sign up for Lit, and you'll start getting the emails, and we'll give you information on call parties and our voter guide, and when an issue comes up, we'll get you the numbers to call the right people. And then once we're in person again, we'll start having meetings. Yeah.
I mean, and I think just coming back to your question at the very beginning, Bob, about what it is about this, why get involved and why do this, and I think, I think as artists, you have to look in a lot, but you also have to look out. You have to look out to get, your subject matter, to see the world, to really be able to do your work that says something. And I think that artists, I think, we think if we, rant on Facebook, or if we, check a box or something like that, we've done our thing, we've made a tweet. And really, one thing we've learned with Lit, you need to call those people at their office. You need to actually get in their face repeatedly and say, we're here and we mean something, and have them say it back, because they will. And like you said, that person said it at that one particular meeting, but if people did that again and again and again, they would do that. Yeah. They would know that, oh, it's a given, I should be saying that, I'm in New York City, this is the town where I do that. So I think that that's important, and I think it's a muscle that you have to use, because we get kind of like, okay, this is past, thank goodness, we checked that box, it's fine, it's gone, but it's something that there are issues that are always going on and on, that we have to kind of keep doing things. And,
so many of us are multi-hyphenates already. Here's another hyphen to add to your hyphens, everybody. Advocacy.
Be an advocate.
If not you, who? Okay.
Could you share the survey one more time? I'm just asking. We're on his computer because I was having technical difficulties. But there's a survey of candidates. We would love to hear from you. What you think of the candidates that are running. If it's a race that you don't particularly know, like, you live in Queens and it's a race out in Brooklyn, you can just skip it. You can move ahead. But particularly, we're interested in knowing who are our members excited about as we move into this endorsement process. And I will also say that we have made progress. At our Meet the Candidates forum, we push them on arts issues, and then multiple candidates are reflecting that language now, a few weeks later. So it's important. I'm
going to start listening for it.
Yeah. All right. I think those are shared.
So we're well over the time, and normally, guys, and today as well, I put people into breakout rooms so they can actually have a little bit of socializing with each other. I hope you guys can stay. If you can't, it's okay. But I want to thank you very much for being my guests today. A topic that's near and dear to me, although I approach it with a 10-foot pole.
That's good and wise. That's good.
Right.
I mean, you doing this is such a big help for everybody, because you're bringing everybody together. You're helping people see possibilities they haven't seen before, and I think you're helping people see potential that they didn't know they had. And I think that doing this in this way is certainly a big step towards helping the greater cause of advocacy for theater.
May I add one little call to action?
Sure.
The Living newspaper, folklore, music, photography were some of the cultural activities that were backed on the federal level by the Works Project Administration in the 1930s. It's about time we had the equivalent in the arts of a WPA on the federal level. And I think there should be advocates for that.
Yes.
So you can add that to your list, Aimee.
Got it.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Paul. It's done, done and done. I want to just thank you again, and I want to remind everybody that we've survived this year very, very gracefully. I mean, True has, thanks to you and thanks to your support. I've started saying it in a new way. I've basically been saying, don't take us for granted. We're fine right now, but know that your support and your continued support is going to keep us fine going forward. So think about making a donation if you can. If you're a member of True, you're welcome here. I don't expect that's the support that you're giving us, is you're being a member. If you're not a member, you can join as a member. There must be somebody in the room who can actually, yeah, there we go, make a donation. I was going to say there must be somebody in the room who can actually take the cue and then put the links in. So thanks, Jay.
I'm here.
So come back with us and be with us next week as well. What am I doing next week? Oh, that's right. We're bringing back Joe Barros and Jen Sandler from New York Theater Barn. We're going to talk about anything new since last year. They were our guests talking about musical presentation and virtual performance, how to get beyond lag and latency, how to actually make it work, make musical presentations work. So we're going to talk about that and other things. So come be with us next week. And that's it.